If you've already watched some of my videos on this channel, you may have figured out that I love prime lenses. I love to mess around with different focal lengths and limit myself to specific lenses. I love playing around with vintage lenses and exploring the different characteristics you can get from them. I realized recently there's one aspect of choosing a specific focal length that I haven't talked about, and it's probably the most important thing to talk about. And that's the psychology behind that choice. The focal length that you choose to take a photograph isn't a technical choice, despite being led to believe that by a lot of YouTubers. They're always going on about lens sharpness and bokeh. These things really aren't the most important considerations. When we use a specific focal length, we're not just choosing how much of the scene in front of us to fit into the frame. We're actually choosing how to convey our story to make the audience feel a specific way. Or at least we should be, if we want to use different focal lengths correctly or to their full potential. This is the power of a focal length, to help us communicate what our intention is with the photo on an emotional level. A wide-angle lens like a 20mm, for example, allows us to create an expansive view and to exaggerate. For landscape photography, we're showing this wide environment in front of us. Now, many photographers will say a wide angle isn't the best choice for landscapes because it can be too wide, it can separate the foreground and the background a little bit too much. But it really depends on what you want to say with your photo on an emotional level. I think landscape photography is one of those genres where we don't consider that enough. We're all always concerned about filling the frame with too little or too much, but we don't always consider what it is we're trying to say. We don't always consider the emotional impact of our lens choice. A vast expanse with a wide angle can convey vulnerability. It can express loneliness. If we shoot a wide scene and have a little person in the frame, it can emphasize how small and insignificant we are in the overall scheme of things. A wide angle can also distort a scene and add tension. This works great in street photography, shooting upwards, for example. This shot shows an interaction between three people on the street, and shooting low and wide really amplifies the tension of the moment. You can go close to a subject with a wide lens and create distortion, which can create a sense of fun. It can be comedic. It can also communicate anxiety or make your character feel larger than life. Maybe you want to exaggerate what someone's feeling, if that's your intention. A standard focal length mirrors how the human eye sees, particularly around 40 to 43mm. I like using this focal range the most because it's natural and it communicates authenticity. There's no distortion or compression, so we're not forcing an emotion onto somebody. We're actually conveying something that's honest and relatable. It's like we're taking the viewer and placing them in the scene. It's what they would actually experience if they were there. So very good for travel and documentary photography. If we put a standard lens close to somebody's face with a shallow depth of field, we can communicate thought and decision making. What's going on in the frame matters more with this focal range than any other, and that's why it's so good for things like street photography. I've heard some photographers say, don't use something like a 50mm prime for landscape photography, it's too boring. I would suggest that how they're using the lens and what they're photographing is what's boring. It's not the lens's fault. Maybe they're simply looking at it as a way to fill a frame with a pretty view rather than considering how to use it to communicate something on an emotional level. I don't know. So standard lenses are the perfect choice for documentary style photography and portraiture too. So talking of portraiture, many photographers will say an 85mm or a 135 is the best choice for portrait photography. And I think they say that because they know that they can knock out the background and make it nice and blurred, separate their subject. But I would suggest that's a technical consideration, not an emotional one. I don't believe we should dramatize a portrait unless we have good reason to do so. But maybe you want to isolate your subject for a really intimate feeling. And also compressing an image with a long lens creates a more serious vibe too. A long focal length creates intensity, tension and introspection. A long lens definitely allows you to reduce distractions, and it can be quite voyeuristic too. There's this idea that having 2 or 3 zoom lenses that give us the ability to choose a focal length from, say, 16mm up to 300 or 400mm is a good thing. We've got the tools that provide the convenience of being able to fit anything into a frame wherever we are. But I don't think that's such a good idea. In fact, I think it's a terrible idea. We should be choosing our focal lengths based on what we want our audience to think, or how we want them to feel, what do we want to convey, not just for the sake of convenience for fitting something into a frame. And this is the way cinematographers work, so why can't photographers work this way too? When you're making a film, every single shot that you take, every single frame that you shoot has been considered based on how you want the audience to feel and react to what they're seeing. Everything is about adding an emotional element to help tell the story. Why don't more photographers work like that, rather than getting wrapped up in technical and practical issues? I believe that when we start using a focal length as a tool for intentional storytelling and as a way to shape our narrative, then we're going to take our photography to a whole new level. Thanks for watching. See you next time.